This week in Ottawa, the ArriveCAN app is finally suspended, even though our health minister stated the government reserves the right to reinstate it once again. The NDP wanted kids to vote, and the Liberals become overwhelmed due to the amount of questions about the carbon tax and upcoming tax hikes they get asked in question period. And also, Mark Gerritsen had another hilarious meltdown. This is Rebel News' Parliamentary Weekly Recap. Happy Saturday, everyone. This is William Diaz, Rebel News' Ottawa-based reporter, and oh boy, what a week we have had in Parliament and outside Parliament as well. Let me talk you through this week's highlights straight from our nation's capital. Monday, the ArriveCAN app was finally suspended after months of data harvesting and authoritarian ruling from the Liberal government when it came to deciding which Canadians were worthy of entering Canada and delaying the returning of elderly Canadian citizens. Trudeau's health minister finally decided that it was enough.
Today, based on the data accumulated over the last few weeks and months, we are announcing that the Government of Canada will not renew the order in Council that expires on September the 30th and will therefore remove all COVID-19 border requirements for all travellers entering Canada. This includes the removal of all federal testing, quarantine and isolation requirements, as well as the mandatory submission of health information in ArriveCAN.
Obviously, before announcing the news, he had to remind Canadians that a vaccine shot every 6 months was desirable and that they should act accordingly.
We need to be mindful of our vulnerabilities since we know that immune protection decreases over time. If it has been 6 months or longer since an infection or your last vaccine dose, anyone 12 years or older and eligible for a COVID-19 booster can step up to increase their protection. Keeping up to date with COVID-19 vaccines is particularly important for individuals at high risk for severe outcomes.
However, the Liberals did not say that they would erase the data they collected from Canadians who were coerced into entering it in the app in the first place, which means that despite the mandatory use of the app being suspended, the Liberal government is still seemingly keeping all the data. Knowing this, I asked Conservative MPs if they would pledge on deleting all the information of Canadians that can be found in the app and if they were elected in 2025. Here's what Ryan Williams, MP for Bay of Quinte, and Bob Zimmer, MP for Prince George Peace River, Northern Rockies, located in BC, told me.
We'll do better than that. We're going to redo the Privacy Act, which governs the government in all privacy. We're not sure just how much private information the government has and uses on a whole slew of apps and applications, and from the RCMP to CSIS to CSE, and our goal is to protect Canadians' private rights. Yeah. There's a bill coming out, C-27, that I'm leading, and the whole premise of that is to protect your private rights, and we believe it should be the Supreme Court has noted that should be our basic fundamental rights ingrained in our Charter of Rights, and we believe that this bill doesn't go far enough, and so we'll be opposing it to and if it goes to committee, we'll be making massive rewrites of it. But your fundamental rights of Canadians are not being adhered to. We don't have enough laws, and certainly we need to rewrite the Privacy Act, and certainly we're going to be the only government that stands up for your fundamental private rights as Canadians.
I think we've always been very clear about the data should belong to Canadians, and one of our biggest concerns around the ArriveCAN app is that collection of data and what it's used for. We've seen, even though they've given many rationales and even we've heard too the rationale to keep it, but being former member of Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics Committee, where we dealt with the privacy and data, absolutely. So concerned where this government's going, though. It seems like they're keeping on going down this road of collecting more data than less, and Canadians need to understand that their data might end up in a place where they don't want it to be.
That same day, we saw both Liberal MPs and NDP MPs that were very upset about the fact that Conservative MPs were using the term just inflation in the House of Commons. I've been somewhat patient with the member, and this is now the third time where he made reference to the term just inflation, or quote unquote, began Liberal MP Kevin Lamoureux. Take a look at his full complaint.
Madam Speaker, I've been somewhat patient with the member. This is now the third time in which the members made reference to the term just inflation. He is obviously doing something indirectly, knowing full well that he cannot be doing it directly. It has been ruled previously by the Speaker as an inappropriate phrase, and this is the third time. So I would suggest to you it is being intentionally done by the member, and he try to improve in terms of just not using that particular term because it is unparliamentary, as has been previously ruled.
And also, NDP MP Charlie Angus spoke badly about the World Economic Forum, saying that with Stephen Harper, the group stole from elderly Canadians. This is very odd coming from Angus, since he has always stated our work exposing WEF was all about conspiracy theories. Here's what Chuck told the Conservatives.
Remember when Stephen Harper went to the World Economic Forum to announce that he was ripping seniors off of their pensions? He didn't tell seniors in Canada, but he told the World Economic Forum. And now this morning, the member for Sherwood Park has pushed a motion to cut off dental care benefits for children under 12. So at least we see a consistency with the Conservatives. They're going to kick seniors to the pavement, and they're going after children. Now, I know the member is normally pretty lame in what he brings forward, but I think that this really sends a strong message. I want to ask my honourable colleague what she thinks about this Conservative vision, where not only do they go to the World Economic Forum to go after seniors, but they use their member from Sherwood Park to try and cut dental benefits to children in need.
Moving on to Tuesday, while taxes and ethical oil were the main topics Conservatives chose to focus on since this parliamentary session began, Pierre Poilievre has strongly opposed the tax hikes, indeed making it the Conservatives' main focus. And that's what they pressed the Liberals on. Former leadership candidate and current member of Parliament Leslie Lewis notably asked if the government will end their planned tax increases, home eating and groceries.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians cannot afford to pay for this government's reckless inflationary spending and deficits. This government's planned tax hikes will drive up the cost of living, will affect rural Canadians, low-income families, and vulnerable populations the most. This government is out of touch with the struggles of everyday Canadians. So I ask my question again. Will the government end their planned tax increases on gas, home heating, and groceries?
Since Poilievre was elected leader of her party, Leslie has been pretty quiet. She has made only a few minimal appearances during question period, which is quite odd. In any regards, that same day, Conservative MP James Bazan absolutely blasted the Bloc Québécois, calling out their lack of logic when it comes to the oil and gas industry. We all know the Bloc is absolutely opposed to exploiting oil and gas here in Canada. They have a philosophical opposition to it. But what's the alternative? Importing oil and gas from foreign totalitarian regimes and dictatorships and transporting it through boats and trains, which burns even more fossil fuels in itself and then costs Canadians even more at the gas pump. Bazan made sure to highlight this point and stated the province of Quebec is dependent upon oil and gas coming from totalitarian regimes. Watch.
It's always surprising to listen to a Bloc member get up and again rail against Canada's oil and gas sector while their own province is completely dependent upon imported oil and gas coming from Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, and other totalitarian regimes. You know, it is unfortunate that they can't see the value in actually producing ethically produced, environmentally friendly oil and gas right here in Canada, but instead will support their industries by buying from offshore sources. You know, I don't know where the Bloc Québécois think their mind's at, but all their gas-fueled vehicles, their automobiles, their tractors, their highway trucks, their rail system is still based on diesel, and yet they would rather buy it from offshore than buy it from us here in Canada.
Poilievre followed suit and also addressed the Liberals' activist-style climate policies that result in higher taxes for families across the country and a higher cost of living. Here's part of what he said in defense of the CPC motion to lower taxes for all Canadians.
Unfortunately, the farmers learned that the carbon tax the government applied would go on the CO2 that they release into the greenhouse. Now, of course, that CO2 is required to expand the growth and increase the produce that comes out of the greenhouse. This CO2 does not actually even go into the atmosphere. It goes into the plant life, something that the Liberals may have missed in grade 4 science class. But the reality is that it makes the tomatoes more expensive. So what is the consequence of the tax on these tomatoes? Well, it is at times more expensive to buy a Manotick tomato in Manotick than a Mexican tomato in Manotick. Why? Because the taxes are lower in Mexico, even though the pollution is higher. What does this price signal do? It tells the customer to buy a tomato from the other side of North America, which has to be trained and trucked all the way up to Canada, burning fossil fuels the whole way there and increasing emissions along the way. What happened to the local 100-mile diet that environmentalists used to promote? Well, this tax makes that diet more difficult and less affordable.
Now Wednesday, and I can't believe I'm really saying this, but guess what? Kids can't vote. Now that's a given, I'm sure that's what you're thinking, but no, there was a motion brought forward by the NDP to allow 16-year-old Canadians to vote. The bill's sponsor, MP Taylor Bashwash, argued that giving Canadian kids the right to vote is something crucial to our democracy. Quote unquote, we saw just a few months ago here in Ottawa during the blockades when thousands of people who aren't feeling like their voices are being heard. We see this around the world, he told a reporter. He claimed that it is beneficial for democracy to have kids vote in Canada. That's absolutely unbelievable.
Today, after question period, Bill C-210, the Right to Vote at 16 Act, faces a big vote at second reading. It's going to be the first time that a piece of legislation calling for the lowering of Canada's federal voting age makes it to a standing vote in the House of Commons. And over my time in politics, I've been so inspired by the young people that I've met, young people who care deeply about the issues, young people who are informed and engaged, and young people who want to be part of our electoral process. The story of the franchise in Canada is one of continual expansion. At one time, only landowning male British subjects could vote in our elections. And of course, over time, Canada broadened the tent to include so many other voices. So right now, 16 and 17-year-olds are a group that, if they were brought into our electoral process, I think would make Canada a stronger democracy. And that's why I brought forward this bill.
Well, surprise, surprise, the bill did not pass. 77 politicians voted in favor of it compared to 245 who voted against. Amongst those who voted, one can find the whole NDP bench. Some Liberals, including disgraced former Olympian Adam Van Coverdeen, who once said F you to one of his constituents, and Elizabeth May. After these shenanigans, politicians had other issues at hand, including a threatening tweet written by a parliamentary press gallery accredited journalist against Conservative MP Garnet Genuis. Indeed, days ago, the Conservative MP made a funny remark against Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau by singing his speech in the House of Commons to the tone of Queen's hit song Bohemian Rhapsody, which Prime Minister Trudeau infamously sung ahead of Queen Elizabeth II's funeral in London. Following Genuis' remarks in the House, a tweet written by Dale Smith created controversy, rightfully so. Smith said that Genuis' comments were lame, and when horses are this lame, you shoot them. Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer brought forward a motion that would, condemn the threatening tweets. Some Liberal MPs voted nay to this. This didn't sit right with the CPC bench.
I appreciate the motion proposed by my colleague in the Bloc Québécois, and in light of that, in relation to the motion that we just adopted, and that all parliamentarians are committed to dealing with threats and intimidation, there have been discussions amongst the House leaders, and I hope that I will get unanimous consent for the following motion. That the House condemn the threatening remarks of Dale Smith, a member of the Parliamentary Press Gallery, who responded through a tweet to a question proposed in the House by the member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, stating that, quote, when horses are this lame, you shoot them.
All those opposed to the honourable member moving the motion will please say nay. No, we don't have unanimous consent.
Another showdown occurred between Poilievre and Freeland that same day. Here are some of the highlights from their tense exchange.
The Leader of the Opposition.
More debt than all previous Canadian prime ministers combined. Doubled the national debt. Those inflationary deficits have bid up the cost of the goods we buy and the interest we pay. And now, according to the parliamentary budget officer, we will have to pay twice as much for interest on that national debt, $46 billion, more than the cost of the entire Canadian military. Liberal solution? Higher taxes on paychecks, gas, groceries, and other expenses. Why won't the government cap spending, cut waste, so that it can cancel its inflationary deficits and taxes?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as usual, the Conservatives aren't bothering to even acquaint themselves with the facts. Had they bothered to read the latest fiscal monitor, they would know that so far this fiscal year, the federal government is actually running a surplus of $6.3 billion. The IMF forecasts that Canada will have the lowest deficit deficit in the G7 this year. We have the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7 this year, and our AAA credit rating was reaffirmed earlier this year. We believe in fiscal responsibility, and that's what we're demonstrating.
Canadians must spend on national debt interest, and they're tripling the carbon tax, tripling that tax on gas, heat, groceries, and basically every good that has to be transported from one place to another. Now at a time with 40-year highs in inflation, Liberals want to raise those taxes even further. Our young people who are going to school are living in homeless shelters because they cannot afford the cost of living. Will this government cancel this heartless tax increase?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, for middle-class Canadians, we have cut taxes and made them better off. Today, a single parent in Ontario with 2 kids under 6 and earning $60,000 a year pays nearly $5,600 less in taxes than she did under the Conservatives. And she'll receive nearly $8,900 more through reduced child care fees and the dental benefit. She will be more than $14,400 better off than she was under the Conservatives.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, the Liberals would tell Canadians they've never had it so good. They've never had it so good. Listen, this government is out of touch and Canadians are out of money. Here are the facts. The food bank use triples, hits record almost every month. Daily Bread Food Bank. GTA food banks say they're facing the highest demand in their history. Inflation is driving Ottawa Food Bank to record heights with no end in sight, and students are literally living in homeless shelters while they go to school. And the Liberals think now is the time to raise their energy costs by tripling the carbon tax. Will they cancel this heartless tax hike now?
Finally, onto Thursday, here are some of the most noteworthy things that took place. Conservatives once again brought forward a motion to cut down taxes, one that caused Liberal MP Mark Gerstein to have a hilarious meltdown and scream at the top of his lungs. They voted in favor of the money that we spent during the pandemic, Gerstein shouted.
Has in calling out the Conservatives for the populism that is on full display right now. And I want to hand it to my colleagues in the Bloc Québécois, because especially today, I've heard it a few times, they seem to have jumped on board with the rest of the House, except for the Conservatives, that are calling out this populist approach that they are taking. It's a populist approach that we saw for the last year and a half in this House. It's a populist approach that the Leader of the Opposition took during his leadership campaign, and is indeed a populist approach that they are taking now. What do populist individuals do, Madam Speaker? They suggest outlandish ideas in order to garner support from people who are vulnerable in particular.
Finally, after question period, I went in front of Parliament and caught Justin Trudeau's beloved Transport Minister Omar Al-Jabra. Mr. Al-Jabra, yesterday the Conservatives brought forward a motion to denounce the threatening tweets of an accredited journalist. Why did some Liberals say nay to that?
How are you today?
Do you not care about the safety of politicians in the House of Commons?
How are you today?
I'm great. How about you? Are you able to answer our question?
I'm enjoying this walk.
Why do you refuse to denounce journalists that threaten conservative politicians?
Are you doing well?
Are you able to answer our question, or is that just not in your mandate? You know, Conservatives always answer our question. Why can't you do that?
I'm glad you're doing well.
You're not able to, eh?
I'm really happy for you, and I wish you success in your career.
What changed in the science between now and in 2 days in terms of lifting the ArriveCAN app, or was it just political science?
Oh, you took your glasses off.
What?
You took your glasses off.
Yeah.
That's good.
So are you able to answer? You're not able. Is it intelligence or just you don't want to? All right, last question from me. You know, you always talk about affordability, or Liberal parties say they want to fight for affordability, yet you're planning on raising the taxes, on continuing the carbon tax. Why won't you cut the taxes?
Watch this. Have a nice day.
Why won't you cut the taxes? All right, sir, have a great day. Good luck with this parliamentary session. Friday was a day of truth and reconciliation here in Canada, which means that while Parliament was pretty slow festivities were occurring on Parliament Hill. Well, there you have it. Here's everything you need to know about what took place in Parliament this week. Make sure to tune in next Saturday to stay up to date with Ottawa. Feel free to share with your friends as well if you enjoyed the content as well. This is William Diaz with Rebel News. If you find value in what I do, you want me to continue to be able to ask politicians the tough questions that, well, mainstream media reporters will never ask because they're so afraid of losing their funding, please head on to OttawaReports.com and consider making a donation. That way I will be able to come right here on Parliament Hill and ask the tough questions that mainstream media will never, ever ask.